I'd like to welcome everybody to the January Public Safety Committee meeting. Could we have a roll call, Kelly?
Chairman Lockmiller. Oh,
Here.
Alderman Plufka.
Here.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Here.
Alderwoman Sims.
Here.
Present.
Move on to agenda approval. Any changes? If not, can we approve by acclamation? Any objection? Okay, we shall. Move on to citizen comment. Is there anyone from the gallery? Yes. State your name and.
Hi, evening, my name is Brian Hansen. Been up before and talked with you all a couple times. I put a little word thing to here together. To all, good evening. First, I want to thank all you for continued service in keeping the city of Brentwood community safe. Your dedication and visual presence throughout our community keeps our property safe and in touch with all of our first responders. So I thank you that. I do have two questions I'd like to present to first responders and this committee. First, last year I noticed an increase in golf carts, side-by-sides, and ATVs on our streets. I can assume these are being used for general transportation to the pools, parks, gatherings within our neighborhoods. Like all trends, I believe this visual presence of this kind of transportation will continue to increase in the years to come from our residents. Most have headlights but no turn signals and are clearly over the 49cc limit that allows exemptions for helmet laws. The new Brentwood bound tunnel will surely attract this equipment being used to access these playgrounds and other elements on the other side of Manchester with this development. My concerns, and I'm sure others possibly, which ordinance allows for this equipment to be used on our public streets? This is not a resort town or golf course, and motorized vehicles are prohibited on our trail systems. Will the city consider pipe barriers to prevent this equipment from utilizing the new pedestrian tunnel to avoid walking, biking, and possibly motorized interactions through that tunnel? If allowed on the public streets, should this equipment be required to have a safety flag or visual notification? Recently, a blue golf cart came flying down our Joseph Avenue over Christmas break with one adult driver, 2 kids in a passenger seat, and 2 kids standing on the back. How is this safe practice, and why isn't this enforced? What is the current policy for enforcement from the Brentwood Police of this kind of recreational vehicle? If an accident occurs between vehicles, pedestrians, or personal property, i.e. a parked car on the street, who is liable for this equipment, which generally doesn't have any liability insurance? We have property in St. Genevieve County, and we're required to have a sticker and proof of liability insurance on our ATVs when we drive on gravel roads. This should be something that's adopted by the city of Brentwood if we're going to continue to allow these on our traffics. My second concern is recently the Brentwood Boulevard traffic has turned into a parking lot for most of the day while the electrical crews made the infrastructure changes near the promenade, as we're all aware. We're also all aware of the traffic problems generated by the coffee junkies at Starbucks during the morning rush. According to MoDOT, Manchester will be closed for the new bridge at Hanley starting May 1st in 2022 for at least 4 months, and the tunnel construction at Mary and Dorothy intersection starting even sooner. During the recent backups, I noticed an increase in traffic through our side neighborhood streets on Litzinger, Eulalie, and Rosalie, and other side streets to avoid these backups and accessing to Hanley and Brentwood Boulevard as cut-throughs. Marshall Road is currently still under construction in Webster, so the east and westbound Manchester traffic will be forced to use Hanley, Brentwood, north and south to avoid this shutdown. How is Brentwood government and first responders planning to control this traffic through our neighborhoods, including speed, personal safety, and emergency response to homeowners during this time? Thank you for your time, and I have copies made. I can leave if anybody would like a transcript.
Thank you, Brian. Kelly, anybody virtually?
No one virtually.
Do we have any attendees at all? Kelly, can you tell if we have any attendees at all? I'm just curious.
There are no attendees.
Okay. All right. I know, Brian, that we started to take up golf carts, and I really haven't put that back on the agenda yet as we got into the winter months, but it's something we are going to be looking into. And then I don't believe, Bola, we've really taken up anything regarding the Manchester Road project when we start closing down Hanley.
I was just going to add to that, those are very good suggestions. The only concern I think about the traffic issue is that MoDOT has experienced some delays in their progression, especially when it comes to land acquisition and things like that. So they've already pushed off two separate times, the construction dates and when those things are gonna happen. I think we have every expectation of trying to deal with what we all assume is gonna be a problem for a period of time. We're just not sure when that's gonna start at this point, and we don't know within a 6-month window when that's gonna start even at this point. Just because the property acquisition has just been slower for them than they anticipated.
I think we probably ought to look into some type of plan going forward and how we're gonna let everybody, all the citizens know about whatever the new detour is gonna be and in coming meetings. We can
Right,
discuss
so
that.
I know that, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Go ahead, bro.
I was gonna say, my general concern was really not for Brentwood residents, because I'd like to think that Brentwood residents respect the traffic speeds and stop signs and all that. It's everybody traveling through that's coming east and westbound on Manchester that inevitably are gonna get stuck at the stoplight there on Hanley, or here waiting in this nonsense trying to get up to 40, and they're gonna say, I'm gonna bust a ride on Eulalie or on Rosalie, and I'm gonna cut over to Hanley to get where I gotta go. And it's just gonna be a nightmare for a
Right.
while.
Yeah.
And everyone's gonna have to deal with it. I just feel like it's gonna be, I'm just curious how the police and everyone can enforce that. And then first responders as well, just getting around once all that traffic is cutting through and getting over to those streets that you have to access Manchester on that side of town as well, so.
No, it's got some good feedback, Brian, then we'll have to take it. Did you have something, Chief Cottrell?
Thank you. Thank you for the comments. I spoke with the contractor, MoDOT's contractor, yesterday. I meet with them next week. I've already met with the surrounding departments and East Central Dispatch to discuss the road closures, discuss our response plans due to mutual aid companies not being able to gain access to Brentwood. Also, Abbott Ambulance, who provides 911 service on either side of us to the east and west, their main thoroughfare will be cut off, so we're bringing them into that conversation as well. The contractor has COVID, so we are meeting on site next week. The plan is May 2nd, the bridge is coming out. And they will be done, they have to be done by August 31st. They're gonna do the tunnel at the same time. So that is information that I was given just this week. We've already just met and discussed, and we will meet again next week.
Okay.
We probably need to include the police department.
Indeed, they have reached out to law enforcement agencies.
Okay.
And they have also reached out to the dispatch center, yes.
More information forthcoming.
Yes. All right, thank you. If that's it with citizen comment, we'll move on to the city administrator report. Anything, Bola?
I have nothing.
We'll move on to committee chair and alderman report. I'd just like to put out our thoughts and prayers for the two police officers that were shot today dealing with the criminals in Ferguson. So keep them in our prayers. Move on to Alderman Plefka.
No report.
Alderwoman O'Neill, anything?
No report.
Alderwoman Sims?
No report.
Move on to department reports. Start with the police. Chief Spees?
Thank you, sir. This is on. Starting with the normal police report and crime report, this will include a year-end report of crime comparison from 2021 to 2020. Recent crime in the city of Brentwood has been surprisingly low compared to our neighbors. Probably have monitored things in the news recently. Lots of warm-up steals going on all over the area. Kirkwood's been hit numerous times here recently. Webster Groves has been victimized a bunch of times. So the warm-up steals are part of that nighttime crime process. It's typically the same people doing the car break-ins that are stealing cars at daybreak when folks are warming their cars up. A couple of these incidents have turned out to be extremely violent. There was a man in Crestwood that was shot at during one of these incidents. So again, most of these folks, you probably tired of me preaching this, but they're almost all armed, and they're very willing to use these weapons if they're confronted by our citizens, no matter where it is. So we've had recently, the Brentwood Police Department has had a detail out early in the morning, starting at 4 in the morning, basically trying to saturate our neighborhoods and areas to make sure that if these style criminals come through at that time, which is their favorite time to come through, we will at least try and see them and run them off if we can figure that out. So On a related note, I was going to share with you that last year documented felony fleeing events just from our police department was at 26. And that's not all inclusive by any means. This isn't the, we don't always write a police report when a car runs from our officers. But there are 26 documented incidents. As you can imagine, these are the people that we need to catch. These are folks that are in the Brentwood community doing the wrong thing for whatever reason. So we're going to talk a little bit later on about flock cameras, and I'll explain to you some of the successes we've had with regard to that. They have led to some of these felony fleeing events over the course of the last, since they've been put in. On a COVID update, we had, our police department was affected pretty heavily a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. We had 4 people out with COVID. It appears that it was all the Omicron version of the COVID-19 virus. For all of our folks, it was a severe head cold, sinus infection kind of environment. They were out, did their 5 days in COVID jail, and then they came back. So we're back to full staff. We currently have 2 officers that are still out. Sergeant Morgan's still out with regard to his heart surgery from 6 months ago. And we also have an officer who had surgery who's out, but we're hoping to get them back and be at full staff, maybe for the first time since I've been here 4 years ago, hopefully. So we're looking forward to that. We decided to cancel the home security seminar that was scheduled for last week due to the COVID issues. Most of the people that attend these kind of things are elderly anyway, and we were, to exercise caution, we decided to move it off. You'll probably see that in June or July, and sometime in the summer is what we're looking at. One of the items that the police department had that was approved by the board in the budget was the replacement of our vests, our bulletproof, bullet-resistant vests. We are looking at doing that process. Sergeant Gibson, our training sergeant's researching that. We have some real concerns over what police officers are being shot with on the street. The shooting that you mentioned today involved a assault-style weapon, a rifle. This is becoming extremely common in the streets all over the St. Louis community and really all over the United States. There are vest upgrades out there. We did not put it in the budget. I will come to BOLA with this. In order to upgrade to a vest that will hold a typical small rifle round, like an AR-15, 223 rounds, they're quite a bit more expensive. But as we look at the value of those vests, they certainly may be worth considering the upgrade and trying to find the money to do it. So, but we're in the process. We have one of those rifle-resistant vests coming to us now. We want to try them on, have the officers wear them, see what the fit is before we really take a serious look at trying to finance the upgrade. If anybody had any questions, I'd be happy to answer them with regard to the police report.
Yeah, I just had a question with regard to the drive-offs. I know that you have talked about favoring this sort of a more comprehensive approach involving other communities as well as involving the technology we're going to talk about a little bit later in this meeting.
Right.
Does any of the incidents or the frequency with which we're getting these drive-aways cause you to reevaluate our pursuit rules, or no?
Constantly. And I've told you before, there are departments in the area that have lifted their pursuit policies at night. And in particular, these guys that are coming in the neighborhoods and rummaging through cars. And these are the people that, they're all over our felony fleeing report. Those are the guys that are not stopping for us. But, there's a lot of considerations to be able to change that pursuit policy. It's dangerous for our officers. It's dangerous potentially to people even at 4 and 5 in the morning. So, but then you have to really look at the consequences like they had in Crestwood, where a guy's coming out to his car and he gets shot at 3 times. Where's that scale get tipped where you say, hey, at this point, it's more dangerous to let these guys go than it is to chase them. So,
is there anything within the committee structure that the Board of Aldermen can help and assist with that discussion or process, or is that more of an internal more technical discussion that has to be had.
There's a couple of considerations. One is our insurance coverage.
Sure.
So, by Missouri state law,
Policy, right?
What's that?
Slate sets down a policy.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
by Missouri
obviously,
state
there's a
law, we're-
cost. If you don't want to follow that, then you probably should get greater
Well, I
coverage.
just didn't know. I knew that they had, or at least I thought that they
It
had
is.
set
You're
out
right.
a policy. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
yeah, so that, and I don't, under Missouri state law enforcement officers can still chase cars that run from them. It's not a law that says we can't. In fact, it creates a felony immediately upon running from the police. You're committing a felony fleeing. Unfortunately, it's just, the bad guys have all the advantage in this regard. They know that most of the time we're not gonna chase them, so that's their go-to, is to run immediately. And we see over and over again, they're so brazen that they'll get jumped in Brentwood and they'll be doing crime in a community a couple over from us. They don't know the boundaries of these cities. All they know is, all they have to do is run, and they do it every night. So collectively, the chiefs in the area, we meet every month, and this topic comes up frequently. So to me, if we were to change the policy, it would have to be an orchestrated event by other cities around us, Clayton, Richmond Heights, Maplewood, and we've had plenty of discussions with them. Quite frankly, and I don't know why this is, we aren't nearly as affected as some of the cities west of us. And I don't know why that is. You would think we're the first stop outside the city of St. Louis, we'd be hit.
Right.
It's not really close, numbers-wise.
So given that, do you sense a willingness in these conversations that they're willing to have those more all-encompassing conversations about coordinating, whether it's flock camera
Right.
data or whether it's something else?
The initial response is, yeah, we would like to sit down and talk about doing some version of a task force that addresses these nighttime fleeings. Really, the truth of the matter comes down to, and I've talked to Bola about this, without your knowledge and backing and awareness of what we're doing and the risk of it, that's the issue, to be honest with you, is that all of these cities have to get the backing of their elected officials and their city administrators so that everybody knows, hey, this is the plan. Because it could go south. I mean, this is what it is. It could result in a police shooting. It could result in, someone getting hurt. And it could easily result in one of our officers getting hurt. So that, I sit up here and preach to you over and over again about the volatility of the people that are doing this. This is a different level of addressing these folks. We could do it. I can tell you that we are very capable of doing it. It's, when is it so bad that we need to flip that switch and say, the risk of the pursuit outweighs what we're facing in our driveways? And that's, I hope it doesn't take somebody getting hurt here in Brentwood to say, okay, it's time. That could happen. I mean, it happened in Crestwood this week. So I would tell you that we are less affected than many of the areas, and I personally think our officers patrolling and this felony fleeing report you're reading, where they're at least running them out of town, is a big piece of that. These guys don't want to go where the police are paying attention. And they may not know the parameters of Brentwood in terms of our city limits, but they know where the police are more active. They're real sure of that. So it's a difficult decision to do that, because it's not only the pursuit part that's dangerous, it's the termination of the pursuit, which is exactly what happened in that shooting today with the 2 St. Louis officers. People think, well, these folks are going to give up if you spike their tires, or, you keep chasing them and they have an accident and they bail out and run. That's when it gets really dangerous. So.
Thank you.
Else? All right, thanks, Chief. We'll see you a little bit later in the meeting. Move on to fire. Chief Cottrell.
All right, good evening. I have a rather lengthy report.
Go right ahead.
And I'll start with any questions on the statistics that were attached to the report. We're still working on the annual report from last year. Don't have that completed just yet, but we did have an uptick in calls. We were slightly over 1,800 for the year. I'm going to start by handing the baton off to Assistant Chief Bernie. He's going to provide an update on where we stand with our strategic plan process.
Good evening.
Hey,
I won't bore you with the statistics of the report that I provided to you already. I'll ask first, so do you have any questions about the status update with the strat plan? Perfect. Okay, so we had about a 76% return rate for the internal employee surveys. We're using those to build mission, vision, value statements. That'll become a component of the overarching goals and objectives within the plan. The external community stakeholder survey was completed as well. Had about a 30% return rate, which is about expected for that type of information. As expected, fire, EMS were the top two priorities of the community, which is about 99% accurate throughout the country. Numbers 3 through 8 were what was surprising to me. So it was emergency management and then a tie with 4 through 8. Public fire prevention, public education, technical rescue, and station tours. We'll still continue to do those, but we're gonna put an emphasized focus on the community risk reduction and the public education piece with the eventual fire marshal position as well. So we're gonna be leveraging those activities. One of the last things that we'll do before we meet again as the officer corps to start developing the goals and objectives is to check within the city of Brentwood if any of the other departments have a strategic plan so that we can review that and see if the fire department is a component or if we can help them to align and do shared goals and objectives. And then after that, we'll present to you guys a plan for approval. We're looking at probably early part of second quarter. We might be able to get it by the end of this quarter as well.
Questions for Chief, Assistant Chief? None, thanks.
Perfect, and I'd
Yep.
like to thank you for showing up for the ice rescue training today. I just got feeling back in my fingers a couple minutes ago.
Yeah, do you want to, are you guys gonna go into that at all, the updates?
Yeah, I can actually do that. So
Please.
for those that weren't aware, we purchased some ice rescue equipment to do contact rescues late last year. That was as a component of a risk hazard analysis of what's coming in the Brentwood Bound project. There's going to be 2 big lakes down there with a boardwalk, which is going to encourage people to be around the lake. We don't have hard freezes here, but it does get cold enough where it makes ice. Just like today that you saw, once you start seeing water frozen on the lake and you start seeing rocks out there, that means people are throwing it to test it. So that's usually when we start seeing activity, people walking, that's when people fall through. So we purchased some equipment and we were able to get some training in at the last minute and the weather cooperated. So we were down in front of Brentwood Forest at Lake Jefferson doing contact rescues today. So it was essentially about a 9-hour day that covered practicals. We certified 6 new techs and then 2 people got a renewal. Essentially equipment overview, how ice forms, the types of ice, self-rescue, all of it, and then that culminated in us chopping holes in the ice, falling through it, and rescuing each other with the ice equipment and the equipment that we currently carry on the fire trucks that is non-traditional, which would be the hose and the ladder. I think we were able to show at the very last evolution that the fastest way to do it is to get the ice suit, get the rope, and go out and do the contact rescue and pull them out. So we appreciate your support for putting that on. Hopefully we'll never have to do this, but we will be prepared for it.
It was very enlightening to watch, to see some guy plunge into an icy lake and just be comfy as, heck, just floundering around in there. But it was enlightening to watch how they would rescue somebody and how quickly, if it's done right, you can get somebody out of that situation.
Yeah, and doing that type of training under controlled circumstances, and then that creates some muscle memory, so when you have to do it for real, it becomes second nature, which is essentially what our job is related to. So again, as stated before, we truly appreciate the support for allowing us to recognize that this could be a potential and be prepared for it, and hopefully it doesn't happen.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, to continue, reference COVID. The city employees have been hit pretty significantly. We have slowed on our testing, thankfully, because we are running very thin on supplies. We should be placing an order by the end of this week to give us another 2-week supply, but the state of Missouri, they do not have the supplies. Supposedly the federal government is receiving all of the Abbott test kits at this point. Our positives have dwindled. I'm not even sure we've had a positive this week that we tested.
We're sitting at 0 right now.
Yeah, so we've tested 0 so far positives this week, so that's great news. Any questions on COVID? EMS billing, this is important for a couple of reasons. Due to the language in the contract and increase in inflation, we did receive a increase in the management fee that is charged to us. So there's no actual cost out of pocket to us. Those are fees that they hold on to once they collect for EMS billing. At the increase from 7.25 to 7 and nearly 3/4, it's probably right around $1,000 increase annually that we will see. So what's significant about that, we're at the 3rd year of our agreement with them. We've had changes in our reporting software, so acquisitions and mergers. So now our fire reporting software and our EMS reporting software is owned by the same company. We pay for the fire, EMS MC pays for our EMS software. So we're gonna have to renegotiate that. Either they pay for it all or we pay for it all and have an increase in fees. So that's the significant piece to the EMS billing. So that, we'll bring that later in the year once we find more information and we need to enter into a new agreement for next year. So we'll bring that back to the committee.
So a 1/4 spike in the CPI and they raise their rate is what
Correct.
that stays that level for a whole year?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
all right, thank you.
We have been working with the state of Missouri. To bill for Missouri Medicaid, we have to revalidate every 5 years. So that is due this year. So I've learned a lot about Medicaid in the last couple of weeks. And all of that documentation's been submitted. We'll be able to continue the billing. As far as training updates, we've been working with our mutual aid partners and the training group to have a more consistent space to perform our training at a facility. So we've done our live burns at the City of St. Louis Training Tower. We've negotiated an agreement to go to West County EMS and Fire. We have more access, more time to set up the trainings. So we're still working on that document, but our goal is 4 times a year to travel to West County on a rotating basis to perform our practical hands-on training. So with our training group and with departments across the region, we did submit 2 grants last week. They were submitted regionally, so we were part of those submittals. Clayton submitted one of the grants for training opportunity for our personnel for technical rescue and emergency management. In addition, Maryland Heights Fire District submitted a regional grant for cardiac monitoring. So that is part of our budget for this year, part of our capital improvement budget. So we will keep an eye on that, see what the status of that grant is about midway through the year. Still working on some administrative, finalizing job description for the fire marshal position. I will be communicating that with BOLA hopefully by the end of this week, and we look forward to bringing more back to this committee on that. And then the final is the update for the house fire we had on Radley Court. We were very fortunate. People were home, they were awake. We had early notification. They called 911 prior to their smoke detector even sounding. So the crews did an amazing job. We had a quick knock on that fire. They have significant damage inside, but it's going to take a lot of repairs. So that's my update. Any questions?
Chief, I've got one, Chief, and this is kind of off the wall, but with the passage of our EV for new home builds and with the popularity of EV cars, are you guys getting any special training, or is there any way to handle an EV fire different than the fire in a gas engine?
So, yes, we're getting additional training. Anything different? In short, the answer is no. What we know through our training and lessons learned from other fire departments that are facing this right now. It doesn't matter if it's a car or the electric bicycles, as New York City has had several in recent weeks. These batteries, they burn very hot. You can get a knockdown. You can knock the flames down. It appears to be out, but they light back up. So what we have to do different is put copious amounts of water on there until we can get it isolated. For example, if a car is in someone's garage, charging or not charging, doesn't matter, you have a battery fire. Our tactics are still the same. We go in and fight that fire, knock the flames down. Once we recognize, hey, this is EV, we have to continue copious amounts, even while the vehicle's being recovered by the tow company. Until it's in a safe environment, we can't leave it alone. We have to continue flowing water. So that's a critical piece that we've learned. The toxic fumes, it's no different than another car burning, or the fumes can be very toxic, so you have to give consideration to the health concerns.
And if there's a situation or a crash and you have to get somebody out of one of the vehicles, you have to handle it differently than you do a regular vehicle?
So discharging those batteries take time. So disconnecting the system, yes, we have training to do that, but once you disconnect it, it still can hold the charge for a long time. So we have to be very cautious where we cut, where we spread, where we put our equipment, not to create an electrocution, not to activate incidentally an airbag. So, yeah.
You're pretty confident we got the equipment you need right as of now for handling those?
As of now, what's available on the market, I'm confident we have what we need.
All right. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to a report from Public Works. Dan, what do you got?
This one's fairly easy and straightforward. Regarding traffic calming, if you recall, we had put the data collectors out on Eulalie. That was last year, probably around July. We were asked to double check that data to see if there would be a need for speed cushions. So I deployed that early last week. It ran through the weekend. It's still running. I checked those today. We'll have the results back for the next meeting. I'll put it in the weekly report too. But so far, I really don't see any changes since the last time. I mean, that's what I've seen so far. And then on Pine Avenue, if you recall, we have both sets of speed cushions installed. I put the data collector at 8928 Pine, so that's in between the two cushions because I wanted to see, I know what the baseline conditions were. You know, it's like with nothing, I have a sample set of data. And then now I'm running this, I wanted to do like a 2-week period, but so far, the results that I've seen just last week and today shows that less than 4%, or less than 3% actually, of the total volume is now going 10 miles per hour or greater. You know, it's a very small fraction. Before, it was like anywhere from 10 to 15% of the total queue of vehicles in a day. 85th percentile speed's gone down, 50th percentile speed's gone down. Everything looks good. So what I plan on doing is I'll put together a table. It'll show before and after, because I know I've seen on social media where people say they don't work or you need to remove them and, you know, that sort of thing. And then the only other thing that I didn't write down was I had someone call on Lawn. They'd like to see them added there. It's the same block between Brentwood Boulevard and High School, but I explained how you went about, or how we went about the process with Pine. You can't just one person ask for them and we do it. So we might see some sort of petition, or maybe you've heard from your constituents, I don't know. But that's the last I heard, was that maybe Lawn. That's it.
Any questions for Dan? David?
Are we down, this is on the solar streetlights in York. Reading the email traffic over the last month or so that I read, that included you, it looks like we're down to just waiting on weather to be able to install a couple of them. We've got.
Yeah, because it sounded like it was, what was it, 9 York? You know, we haven't done an
And then the one
easement.
with MoDOT, they're actually getting you the permission.
Right, that's my understanding, that MoDOT would give I guess, the HOA or,
Right.
group permission, and then they in turn would give it to us.
Yeah, and I thought that's already been done. The last email
I
I
haven't
saw
seen it
said
yet
that they were,
unless I'm
okay.
missing something. I'll have to look in my.
I'll follow up with them, okay. Because I thought we were just waiting on warmer temperatures to be able to dig and get it done.
Yeah, we would still need that, like, you're right, if we do get the easements and everything's fine land-wise, we just need to wait before it's,
Okay.
say 45 or so.
Right.
So we can pour the foundations.
Right, okay, thank you, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Move on to consent agenda. We did not have any minutes under that, so we'll move on to old business. Dan, come on back up, because we've got high school on High School Drive, removing a no parking signs.
Yeah, this one's pretty straightforward. This was brought to, well, I guess it would have been the very last public safety, the one in October, since we didn't have a few of these, but over there by, to the north.
Recording stopped.
Oh.
Recording in progress.
All right. This is that first home to the north of Carl's on the east side of High School. They were asking if we could somehow change the municipal code, because right now it says no parking at any time. And that's that way across both sides of High School, just to the north of Manchester. So looked at it, took some measurements. I know it's going to have to change whenever MoDOT does its changes to the road there, since I included that drawing in there. You can see how that changes, and it's going to have some parking space changes. So long story short, we would be able to make those accommodations. It would be roughly 200 feet from the edge of Manchester going north that we'd be able to allow parking on that east side and still prohibit parking on the west side of northbound High School. So what I would need is a motion to take that change or recommendation to the full board, and then we would make a change to the municipal code, table 3A.
I guess the question is, how far up are we going? Are we going all the way to Madge?
No, what I plan on doing, that like red line that says 200 feet, it would be just on the north property line, basically the north side of 2646. So that very first residential home, it would be to his north side.
Well, here's the thing. The street is wide from that point. Make things simple, I would like to see us continue the no parking all the way up to Madge. The street's very wide there on High School, and it would just be on the east side of High School, and stop at Madge, because once you cross over Madge, there are no parking signs on the rest of High School all the way down to Litzinger, and maybe even further, I don't know. But that's even more narrow on the other side of Madge than it is here. So I'm just afraid we do it for in front of one house, then it just becomes the next house, the next house. If we just do that whole side of the street, would there be any problem with that on the east side, up to Madge?
I walked it and I didn't see anything, so at face value, I would say I don't foresee a problem. I'll go back out there just to double check, but I only did it because it was just the one person that asked, so I thought, well, I would just take it to that transition point. But I know, to your point, it is actually prohibited all the way up to Madge and just a little bit beyond, so, currently. But it could be amended such that it is just that east side of High School from Manchester going, I'll take a new measurement, because I'll have to figure out what that is, if it's, 400 feet, 500, but,
But I'd entertain a motion to remove the no parking from Carl's parking lot all the way up to Madge on the east side of High School.
Oh, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So before we made a motion to something like that, wouldn't we want to at least talk to 2838, and then the next, looks like two more houses would be involved here. The one that faces onto Madge, and then the one just north of the one we're talking about now. I don't have a problem with making the motion as long as we get some kind of opportunity for that homeowner to express whatever concerns, if they have any at all.
Okay.
I don't know how
Well,
you
then,
feel,
you want to
Sunny.
just direct staff
I
to do
think
so?
that's- Yeah, I think that's the cautious approach.
Kathy has her hand raised.
Kathy?
Yeah, I'd question why we have no parking. If the street is wide enough there to allow parking on the right side, I could see times when Carl's is busy and a couple cars might need to park closer to Madge, and then the drivers walk back to Carl's. So having a couple spaces up there closer to Madge might be advantageous in the long run, rather than just close them off arbitrarily.
All right, so we just want to direct staff to at least.
Yeah, I can make contact with these other folks to the north of 2646 and then take measurements and bring it back to the next meeting. And
Yeah.
see if we want
Yeah.
All good with that?
to. Okay.
All right, thanks. All right, moving on to item B under old business. I believe Chief Spees, you're back up with an amendment to the police officer wellness program?
Yes, sir. In the budget, the wellness program was passed by the Board of Aldermen for the police department. It's close to the one that the Brentwood Fire Department instituted a while back. Alderman Lockmiller, you asked that you get an opportunity to review the contracts provided by the SSM and the others on the those were sent to you. If you have any questions, Major Hawkins and I can try and answer anything you have.
Well, I guess it went before the city attorney, right, Paula?
That's correct.
Yeah, and so those are his red lines?
Right.
And then, except for mainly some text, changes in text, I guess the bulk of it's on Exhibit A, where these costs are reconfigured into different areas, and why is that?
Help me out, Alderman. I'm sorry. Which one is Exhibit A?
On the contract with SSM Medical Group.
Is
I
this the
believe,
one,
under
the list of everything?
Yeah, that's it.
Like this one
Yes.
here? So this one is basically a selection of what we kind of talked about offering the officers. So for example, while this mimics what the fire department has, they have different needs for some of the health assessments that they might look into in this program based on what they do and what they're exposed to. So we kind of, took a cue from that and did something similar here. So the highlighted part up top is basically a physical examination. And everything that's included 1 through 6 there is included in that. And the additional 3 highlighted items under additional medical components, we identified as critical for law enforcement. It probably is critical for first responders, period, but especially due to the high levels of stress, cumulative stress, et cetera, that shift workers face, law enforcement faces, et cetera. So the CT heart scan, kind of a preventative thing, cardiac stress test, preventative thing. PSA blood test is for gentlemen, obviously, also very preventative, kind of presenting them with something that they would not be able to go and get at anything short of a great deal of cost of their own, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And then are any of these BOLA covered under insurance instead of out of the
I don't
budget?
believe so. No.
Kind of what we
Yeah.
used to present the officers, or present the program to the officers as hopefully a real benefit to them. And we used several people, and Bull, I think you mentioned this actually after Matt Morgan had his bypass surgery, was the reason that they caught his issue was that he had a cardiac stress test. Now, that was on him, it was with his physician on his concern, et cetera, but had he gone and done one of those sooner, had he gotten a CT heart scan sooner, they would have been able to probably prevent any damage and not had to do a quadruple bypass, et cetera. And a lot of that kind of, spurred us forward here on that.
And the version we have here now is what the city attorney has signed off on. or
Signed
whatever.
off on and been signed off on by SSM.
Yes.
And we, I think, forgot to bring that to you. Is that why? What was the story? Because you caught it.
They changed where the police department was named in there as opposed to just the city. It was like the police department and the city of Brentwood, and they took that out. So many of the changes were
literally just taking that component out so that if there was ever any issues, they would only be dealing with the city and not also the city and the police department together,
Right.
separate entities.
Other questions? So we just need a motion to forward this on in the form of resolution to the full board.
That's correct.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Major Hawkins. Moving on to the flock camera.
Wanted to give you an update on the 7 flock cameras that the city approved. As you know, the flock cameras offer all kinds of benefits to us in law enforcement in terms of not only for immediate notification of a vehicle that's wanted, but also back-end investigative efforts by our detectives should we have an incident. Currently, there are 3 flock cameras. This was forwarded to you, but I'll go through it real quickly. There are 3 deployed, 170 westbound on Eager, eastbound on Eager, and Brentwood and Rimwood are the 3 up and running. The next ones that are due up are at McKnight and Highway 64, and on Brentwood Boulevard, south from Highway 64. Those are the next 2. Those are fairly imminent, probably within the next 3 weeks. There was some delays on those cameras based on the fact that we have to go in and hardwire them into the electrical poles, had to get approval to do that. That's why there's a delay on the remaining 4. Downstream is McKnight and 64 northbound on McKnight, and then Hanley between Eager and Music Memorial will probably be the last one. Basically, these LPR processes and the flock cameras are very similar to the ones that we use in the police car, in that you can set up what's called a hot list. So as vehicles come through, the license plates are read, the officers can actually log on and ask the computer to send them whatever hot sheet information they want. So they can filter it, so to speak. Currently, there's been over 2,000 vehicles that have gone through. Well, obviously, the lion's share of those is going to be for traffic offenses and things like that. Much less concern than others. There have been cars that have come through, wanted for felony fleeings, one was wanted from a homicide, and a couple other substantial cases, which, by the way, directly led to a couple of the pursuits that we had on our pursuit form. So the flock cameras on the front end, especially for our nighttime crime, can be very beneficial because the alerts come in within about 20 seconds or so to our officers in the car. So they can immediately proceed to the area where a vehicle went through that's wanted for whatever it is. And then on the backside, it provides the detectives an opportunity to investigate a lot of different ways so that they can pull video up from after the fact in an incident and hopefully be able to identify a car that may be involved. So that's the update on flock cameras. And by the way, the flock cameras are really becoming more popular. Clayton has them. There's several cities in the area that have them now. They're all shareable. So we can plug in to Clayton's, we can plug into whoever. So eventually, as these things become more popular, we should see an environment where that data sharing happens very quickly and almost in real time.
Questions for Chief on that?
Yes. Yeah, it also affects the state of Illinois as well. So oftentimes the people that come visit us here in the city of Brentwood originated from the other side of the river. So some of the Illinois communities, and I believe there's one on Poplar Street Bridge, is my understanding. So we have an incident here, we can send in information to the east side authorities as well. So again, the sharing piece is there.
Thanks, Chief. We'll move on to police security cameras.
So about, I go back to October, I think, at the public safety meeting, we had a discussion about a recommendation that the city of Brentwood consider an ordinance that would require businesses with greater than 25 parking spots has to have security cameras in place. Cameras that are usable and shareable with law enforcement. I believe it was you, Alderman Lockmiller, that requested that we have Mr. O'Keefe write a proposal of what that ordinance may look like for consideration. That was uploaded on the board docs for you. Kevin, as you can see, if you have it in front of you, Kevin prepared a document that, and again, this is just a prototype of what could be. It would go into effect on the 1st of 2023, and would require 25 parking spots and more to cover their ingress and egress areas. You know, one of the locations that we really have struggled with for the time that I've been here as chief, in almost 4 years, was one of our hotels who had no security cameras. They finally got them in place. So that would be one of the affected people that would be in compliance with this ordinance, because now their cameras do face their parking lots, and we will have the opportunity to be able to see ingress and egress areas. So really, this is just for, I think, more for discussion for you to determine whether or not you think it's a good idea to move forward with it, and that's why we had Mr. O'Keefe write this.
Couple questions. 25 parking spaces or more, do you have a sense of how many businesses that encompasses in the city of Brentwood?
Well, right off the top of my head, and which, you know, just to give you a little, scope this a little bit for you, we've had over 500 thefts from our retail areas. We have a retail officer, Alex Wilcox, who's assigned to that area to liaison with our retail to try and, you know, we're looking for ways to make this better in terms of reducing the theft, because we don't want to run the risk that theft will drive stores out of Brentwood. It isn't to that point now, but we want to try and help. The cameras, to answer your question, I think that the primary place that we would be looking at are our 3 major shopping areas. You know, if we had cameras just up in those 3 areas, and we cannot get movement from those folks to do it, they just, for whatever reason, they're not complying. That would be my first thought. So.
Do you have any sense of what the cost is? I mean, to the business, would it be? I mean, obviously you're talking about hardware, and then,
right.
And then would they also have to pay for some sort of a service to monitor and repair it?
Depends. This is really about, you know, it's kind of like car shopping. You want to buy a Corolla, or do you want to get a Cadillac? Because the higher you go into these cameras, the more expensive they are, including monitoring processes. So just to give you a little idea, the flock cameras were about $18,000 for 7 cameras. Now, these are high-octane smart cameras. These are not just put up and plug and play kind of recording cameras. So normally those just surveillance cameras positioned on lots are not that expensive. So if you just take, you know, if you take Brentwood Square, there would probably be, I would throw you a number. I think they have really effective circular cameras now that can cover areas broadly, as opposed to just focused in on a particular area. I would think 6 or 8 of those just in that area would cover that parking lot pretty effectively. So, you know, you're looking at the cost of the camera and then a subscription fee behind it in order to maintain the cameras.
Do you have any sense of why these businesses would be so reluctant to put up video cameras for
I really don't know the answer to that.
property?
You would think in today's world that they would be cautious, because, you know, we have enough events. It's not just Brentwood. Retail generally is just drawing crime. I mean, it's just what it is these days. So you would think from an insurance perspective and a liability perspective that they would think it would be a good idea. I cannot answer that question. I don't know, other than to tell you, I guess it just really comes down to the cost. But, you know, you look at a place like Brentwood Square, and you have several stores and entities there that could share the cost. And Bola and I have actually talked to the property owners, and what is their role in this and responsibility in this. Personally, I think it's their responsibility. They house the tenants there. So the parking lot security, to me, should be their responsibility. So it's less the Whole Foods people as it is the whatever group owns that particular area shopping center that may be the target of this style of enforcement in law.
Bola, could I ask you a question?
Sure.
I mean, oh, I'm sorry. Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I'm not going to be the one that writes this ordinance, but I've lived the experience of, oh, we didn't save those text messages past 10 days, and they're gone in my work life. Is there, would there be any reason, and it just jumped out of me that they have to keep these recordings for at least 30 days. Is there some kind of mechanism, is it redundant and not necessary to say 30 days and, or unless you've received a written request to maintain it for X amount of time, or does that happen anyway?
That would probably happen anyway.
Okay.
If we have a robbery on a parking lot, our detectives are gonna be there within a couple hours probably looking for that video.
Yeah, that was the only, I don't know, from the civil, for me, I think it seems like, someone slips and falls in the parking lot, like, or, it would have, great evidence, that it would be, from a perspective of maybe from a civil standpoint, but there's no concern that, unless you affirmatively say, that they'll just delete it, or that 30 days somehow isn't
A couple
enough
different
time.
schools of thought on them too. I mean, you go in a lot of parking lots, and you go into Sam's Club in Maplewood, they have big, scissor trucks up there, and they want you to know that they are videotaping everything that's going on. Some places would prefer it to be more surreptitious, where the cameras are up, nobody really pays attention to them, but they're there and running. So, kind of harking back to your question on why they don't do it, you could do it either way. That can't be a piece of it either, I don't think. That they don't want to make it look like we're crime-ridden or something, because there's cameras everywhere you go today, literally, except on the parking lots and our retail areas. So,
I don't have any other questions. Thanks, Chief.
Bola, was there any pushback on,
Yeah, it hasn't. I think it's been several years ago, and this was maybe shortly after Chief Spee started,
it was
when,
probably 3.5 years ago.
yeah, when he first started having this discussion with all the commercial owners, particularly in our retail sectors, and he didn't get a favorable support, right, for this, and during that time, I got a call from one of them who wanted me to know their position on it. So I don't know, but there was one that kind of supported it, right? So once it gets out there, I'm sure it will be an opportunity to hear their reaction to it. So an option for you to consider, instead of just maybe approving this for implementation, we could, I wouldn't say slow it down, but we would gauge if their position has changed. If it hasn't changed, then the board could certainly move forward, but we would know how they would react.
I mean, at the very least, we'd want to talk to the rest of the Board of Aldermen.
Question. And just because these things can take on a life of their own, these are cameras at businesses of a certain threshold where, and I'll stick my neck out this much, that they don't have an expectation of privacy on a private lot of public accommodation. There's no indication that, we're putting cameras up outside my house, or, where there might be privacy or, I know there's an expense that's tied into this and more work for the business owner, but, addressing any of those sort of privacy
Right.
concerns, where they're
And
not
that's why
really in
the
play here.
25 parking spot threshold was the thought, and that's what other cities have done, was, this ordinance would be designed for business areas that are frequently the locations that we investigate crime. To me, I mean, I don't understand how they wouldn't make it obvious what they were doing so that it would be a deterrent as well. But that's a different conversation. I think Bola's got a reasonable point in having them weigh in again. All I would ask is that somehow the elected officials become part of that conversation, because the police department didn't have the pop to get this done the first time. Quite frankly, I don't think they were real interested in really moving forward with anything, because they didn't think that we were capable of doing anything about it. We were asking. This might be a different conversation if you all had somebody had a meeting with them in the elected official level and said, look, there's enough crime here and enough issues in the city of Brentwood that we need some help, and just see what they say. I don't know what their attitude would be at this point.
let me get Kathy in here. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, thank you. I know a few years ago, there was the discussion about asking more of the merchants to provide their own security. And as far as I can see, Deerberg's is the only one that is hiring a in-store security guard. So it may have been financial that they chose not to, but at some point, I think it doesn't look as though they are going to take responsibility to do anything. I think if we have to kind of give them a push and say, look, this is for the good of the community, I'd really support that, not drag it out because they're reluctant. I think we need to move forward and say, this is a good thing and go ahead and do it.
As we're socializing this with our business owners, I'd want to know what do the citizens think? I mean, as someone who lives behind, Total Wine, I mean, if you're trying to catch crime and the businesses aren't supporting that, I mean, I would be interested to know, just as general citizens, what do they think? I think it'd be important I'd like to see their input too.
In fact, the Metrolink is a great example of Total Wine's one of them, right? I mean, we have a ton of theft from Metrolink visitors. Many of whom would be caught on these cameras if we had the opportunity to be able to have it.
So can we address that issue and the issue of businesses by making a motion to recommend that the full Board of Aldermen take up this ordinance as it's configured, and call a public hearing?
Open house.
Or open house, or whatever, I mean, so, but that, to the
Town
chief's
hall,
point.
gather
the
round
chief's
if we have
point-
news.
To the chief's point, that it involves elected officials in their role as elected officials, that it isn't just hey, come on over on a Saturday and let's talk about this. Let's do it during a scheduled meeting of the entire Board of Aldermen, make it a part of the agenda at some point in the future, so that, we're all here and engaged in that conversation.
Do that, Alderman, we could put together a nice presentation from the police department about the crime in those, particularly our retail areas.
Absolutely.
And,
I think that's a good, I think
that's a great
your idea is a really good one about, and it would allow the public to chime in as well.
Since we have a sample ordinance here on what we'd be passing, I mean, it'd be something to get in front of these people.
Yeah.
So would it be like as we do a public hearing during our regular board meeting?
It could be. There are a number of different ways to schedule it. Why don't I talk to the mayor, put something together, we'll send it around, select a date, and then go from there.
So do you need some motion or vote from us?
I think what we have is good.
Okay. Okay.
And then does this have to go into our building code as far as section 400 or anything like that?
It will become permanent. Yeah, it'd be an amendment to the code.
So it would go in front of P&Z also?
I don't know. So Whitney just asked me if she needs to be part of this meeting, and we can talk through that, and it'll be part of our
I have to get in the
memo.
weeds right now. But
Yeah, it'll be part of our memo. Definitely, there will be a presentation from the police department, and then there'll be an opportunity for the public, whether they're the owners of the property or just residents, period, to speak. And I think this might be better for a topic-specific meeting rather than a Board of Aldermen meeting. Otherwise, we make the agenda light so that you can dedicate, if it's an hour that you need for this, then it's an hour. Or if it's longer or shorter, whatever. So we'll think through how to structure it and try to get it done.
Yeah. Can I ask that perhaps there could be a short 4 or 5 minute version that we could show at a ward meeting?
Yeah, I think that's what we're talking about.
What do you mean, like a presentation?
Yeah, just a presentation of some sort. So it's not a public hearing where people have to visit City Hall, but we can go to them and say, this is under discussion. Let's have feedback about how you feel about it.
that you could use at a ward meeting, you said?
Yes, is that possible?
If there
Chief
could be a
Spees?
PowerPoint put together, is that something
I
that?
think Alex and
But
Major
that
Hawkins
wouldn't be
can do
like in
that.
lieu of, that's in addition to. Yeah, I know,
think
like a
that's in
handheld
addition.
would be great. I mean, so we
Yep.
can,
However you want to do it.
or yeah, PowerPoint.
Great idea. That's a great idea, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Yep. Okay.
All right, we good on that one?
Yes, sir.
On to panhandling.
This came up about 3 or 4 months ago regarding the panhandling, with some discussion around whether or not our current ordinance is effective enough to be able to, for the officers to be able to address panhandlers in Brentwood. The short answer to that is, it is. The long answer to it is, it's still a concern for us to arrest people for a panhandling charge. It is the focus of multiple lawsuits from the ACLU. So we respond to these calls for people panhandling. And if someone goes to jail, it's often from bench warrants or a warrant for their arrest, typically in contact with the officers. But in terms of actually charging and bringing them to municipal court on this charge, it really, I have lived this in the city of St. Louis, it really puts you in a laser focus of the ACLU, and they will come after us if we start booking people for these charges. You know, you start looking to see whether or not this is, you get the bang for your buck here, is this worth it? I tend to think it probably isn't, unless the person is really an issue or problem, along with standing on a corner with a sign. Are they doing something else? Is it technically a law violation? It is. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, if this is something that you want us to book people for, then we can start doing that. It will come with residual issues, I promise. I know several chiefs in the area that have used their ordinances for booking people for panhandling, and many of them have backed off. It just isn't worth it. So, but to clarify the ordinance, I think the ordinance we have is specific enough to the issue that I don't see a reason to change it. The question is whether or not we choose to enforce it fully, where we're making custodial arrest on people that are standing on a corner with signs.
But you've always got that leeway on what, even though we pass a law, how strictly you want to enforce it.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes it's hey, you're breaking a law, you need to go, you know, take them to a homeless shelter, do what the officers do every day. So they try and knock the problem down without it being something that's going to turn around and bite us on the backside. So, you know, there's more ways to deal with these folks than just putting cuffs on them, taking them to jail. So, and as you can imagine, they're typically people that are just struggling with mental illness, and they just keep going on the issues that these folks have. So,
I'm sorry. So would passing something like this, with the changes that are recommended, be of any hindrance, or they just not be of much help
the latter.
In the problem as it exists?
The ordinance as written addresses what they do. You know, it's the exact law that the ACLU is attacking. But there's really no other way to write it. That, you know, you're prohibiting people from standing on a corner soliciting, and you can sugarcoat it all you want. At the end of the day, that's really what the officers are doing, is they're going to arrest somebody for standing there holding a sign.
Right.
So, and again, if they're being aggressive, if they're being, you know, in any way violent, or and then it does happen. Especially in our retail areas, these folks will filtrate into our retail area, and they'll do their aggressive panhandling there. That's a little different story than a passive person doing it.
But go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, I'd like to see us pass this up to the Board of Aldermen, whether it ultimately gets, you know, adopted as an ordinance. I don't know. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. I just,
As a protective measure for the
yeah,
city.
it's just one more thing that could be used if necessary. Not that it's necessarily going to be used and that it's going to be all that effective in doing anything more than what you're already doing these days. I don't know.
Is there, I mean, as best we can, does this proposed ordinance kind of thread the needle? I mean, I get it. A pretext is a pretext, and
Right.
I mean, but this is, I mean, on the one hand, this isn't the crime I'm most concerned about in this,
Right.
you know, walking while being poor. But I can see where it would make sense to have something in place. And, you know, it's one thing to respond to a call, and if they're already committing another crime, I think that's a horse of a different color. So.
That's rarely the case. They
So-
almost always come in as the guy standing on the corner with a sign.
I mean, is it problematic to, yeah, we have an ordinance, but we're just not gonna enforce it? I mean, does that imply, I mean, is that something you need to worry? I mean, or am I being too academic about this? I mean,
There is a level of discretion there for law enforcement generally. And I think the world's moving that way anyway. I mean, honestly, if we had some services on the backside of this to get these people somewhere for some help, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs.
I mean, I
homeless
can see where it could
shelters.
rise to someone after repeatedly aggressively not, there could be a time where maybe they're cited. I mean, I can conceive of facts. It seems uncommon
Well, there's times when they go, yes,
that,
Yeah. that
do
happens.
I think that you should deploy your department to arresting every panhandler out there, but I can, if we're trying to respond to a recent lawsuit as best we can, I agree with Alderman Plufka. Maybe we should it should be brought up to the board for
I do too. If the,
broader discussion.
yeah, if the city attorneys had looked at this and he's got these recommendations, I think we should follow them as far as changing our code.
It is already on the agenda? Oh, you don't need us to vote it?
I'm presuming
Up to-
vote.
Well, we could all
All right.
just leave and
With the,
The democratic process, Paula.
that's right. Yeah.
Kathy, did you have any questions?
Well, just one that sometimes we see the same people at different intersections around town. And the word is that this is organized. They are taken places by somebody and that's their station for the day. And some of the gainings are upwards of $30,000 and $40,000 a year. I don't know. It strikes me more a mental illness thing than organized, whatever, panhandling. But there's so much mental illness going around today that I think if we can do anything to help people rather than putting more stumbling blocks in their way, we're better off in the long run. So if the chief is comfortable with not adding anything, I would tend to go along with that, but I can also see why we could have something else in writing. So I guess I could go either way.
St. Louis County does have a police officer that's assigned to a homeless task force that is a resource for these folks too. So the world's starting to move toward helping these kind of people as opposed to just booking them and then they get back out 2 days later and then they're doing it again. So, which is a good thing. So, but the wheels of that are slowly turning. It's expensive.
Motion to forward this on to the full board.
Yeah, like the Oracle at Delphi, I will make the motion that that we send this proposed bill, this proposed ordinance to the full Board of Aldermen for consideration.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All right, we have no new business. Kelly, we're in the citizen comment. Is there anybody out there?
There is no one.
All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks.
Chief, thanks for your